Hi, my name is Jasmine Jones. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed therapist, and welcome to Black Girl, a Therapist in the Wild. Today's video is going to be on trauma bonding and the detrimental effect it has to those suffering complex PTSD and those currently going through chronic abusive situations. So, stay tuned. So, trauma bonding was a theory proposed by Judith Herman in 1992 in her book Trauma and Recovery. She proposed that people that have experienced prolonged trauma have more intense behaviors, more intense emotions, and even complete personality changes than those that have experienced one trauma. She noticed that people that have been in prolonged trauma situations tended to be more withdrawn, more passive. They displayed learned helplessness, which is basically when we experience a conflict situation or an abuse situation over and over and over again, eventually our brain does what's called learned helplessness, where it gets used to the negative situation in our life and it stops fighting. So basically our brain just kind of shuts down our will to fight, and we accept this harmful situation as what this is life. So they become more passive and withdrawn, and they accept that this is the way life is and there's no point in fighting. She also noticed that people will display repetitive behaviors, dating violent abusive people, self-harming behaviors, using drugs and alcohol, things like that. And then a year later in 1993, psychologist Donald G. Gutton did a study that basically found that women, cis women, who have been through prolonged abuse situations, prolonged relationship abuse, so that was the focus of the study. Prolonged relationship abuse showed that as soon as they left the relationship, they experienced a loss of self. They experienced a loss of who they were. The relationship basically, dictated who they were as a person. So when they left, it was like they lost their selves. People have a deep attachment to an abuser, so deep that it can change the structure of the mind. So there are four hormones in the brain that have something to do with trauma bonds. And if you want to think of trauma bonds as a addiction, so that reward system in the brain that gets lit up when we do drugs, that dopamine that gets released when we do crack or heroin, things like that, is similar to what happens when we form trauma bonds with an abuser. So we're going to start with oxytocin. Oxytocin provides the bonding feeling, that feeling that we get when, we have a child. So a woman has a child, that motherly bond that forms, that's the hormone that influences that motherly bond and can come up in any relationship. That honeymoon period that you experience when you first get into a relationship, that awesome, great, everything is wonderful feeling, has to do with oxytocin trying to form and create this bond in your mind with this other person. So that gets released, and then when you meet an abuser, usually they're very charming. So oxytocin gets released. We feel that rush, that good feeling. And then that's kind of what comes into play when the abuser starts doing that back and forth type of thing. Wants you to change who you are to match what they want, when they want you to, that those little things they give off in the very beginning, like, I don't like the way that dress fits, go change into a new dress so that'll please me. So the oxytocin is pumping and you're just like, oh, I want to please him and keep this bond going, so I'm going to go change my dress so that he can be happy, or she or they. So next is dopamine. That is the feeling of seeking and wanting and craving. That is that craving feeling. So when you have somebody that is nice sometimes and mean another time, it's like you start to crave the nice times. The oxytocin is kicking in, and the dopamine's kind of pushing that craving for that bonding period where you felt happy. So you start to want this bond, you start to crave this bond, and so you start to change yourself so that you can create this bond again with this person that is manipulating you, just to basically get a reaction out of you to see if they can control your emotion. Then we have the endogenous opioids. Those hormones regulate the pleasure, pain, withdrawal, and dependence factors of our behavior. So they influence the hurt that we feel when the person leaves. They influence that deep longing, that physical pain, that hole in your chest. Also, oxytocin plays a part, a big part in the female brain, because, that is the bonding. That's the biggest thing that's like influencing this trauma bond. It's called a bond. That's the biggest thing influencing the trauma bond, because it wants that positive moment. It wants to fix that bond. Like our brain plays a trick on us, and it wants to fix that bond that we had. And so we end up, longing and wanting and needing this person, and then we get the withdrawal effects from the opioid receptors and things like that, the depression, the anxiety about how to fix this bond. How can I do it? We get hyper vigilant and hyper focused on fixing this bond so that we don't feel this pain anymore. So we do anything we can, to fix this bond. Lastly is the corticotropin releasing factor. So that deals with withdrawal and stress. So the cortisol that's released, the stress we feel, that kind of influence. So they all work together. Things that are sounding like they're doing the same things, that means it's like a double relay of pain inside of you now, because you have things that do similar things for each other. Like the dopamine influences the oxytocin, so that you crave the bond because of the dopamine and the oxytocin working together, and then the opioid receptors causing all that withdrawal and that pain from loss, and then the corticotropin releasing factor is causing that stress. So our body is haywire when we are in these trauma bonds. Our body and our mind, they go together. They're the same thing. It's about our mind is a part of our bodies. So it's all going together to influence this pain that's basically like a withdrawal from a drug. So I also like to talk about the cycle of trauma, to include that in this video, just to kind of go into why trauma bonding and intermittent positive reinforcement becomes an issue. So intermittent positive reinforcement is basically when you give that person what they want and they give you a reward. And that's kind of how they slowly start to use that controlling vein in your life. You will see like that slow trickling water torture like effect with emotional abusers specifically. So they will, start off slow, like, oh, you're going out to dinner. Oh, I don't like that dress you're wearing. Can you try on something else? And then you go change your dress. And it's kind of like they're testing the waters too, just to see how much you'll do for them too, as abusers, I mean. And like, well, you go change that dress and you go change it and you come back and there's your reward. I changed something, I fixed something, and now I have this reward. So then that's how they slowly get you in. They build the relationship up on what you can do for them to make them happy. And then they pull the rug out from under you, and, you're left not knowing what will make them happy. One day, runny eggs makes them happy, and the next day, the eggs are too runny. One day, these pairs of shoes are their favorite pairs of shoes on you, and the next day they're ugly and they don't like them. So it's kind of like this back and forth. So that's how we get into the cycle of abuse. So with the cycle of abuse, you see a period where tensions start to build, the anger starts to build, the frustration starts to build. You might notice in the abuser's behavior that they have changed in ways that they treat you, and so on and so forth. And like the silent treatment, or the I'm too busy to do this treatment, consistently in a manipulative way, of course. And then comes part 2 is the incident, the explosion, the abusive behavior, the yelling, the hitting, the tirade and things like that. And then there is the reconciliation phase where they apologize and they're sorry and they're okay. And then there is the calm phase, the honeymoon phase, basically, where they're giving you stuff and they're the perfect partner and everything is great. Or they're the perfect parent and everything is great. This happens with, children and child abuse and things like that. So with that being said, though that cycle of abuse can run the gamut of happening in like a day. Like in the morning, the tension is rising. Mid-morning is they hit you in the face. Mid-afternoon, they reconcile and they're sorry. And then nighttime, they're the perfect boyfriend again. And then the next morning, it all starts over again. Or it can be like you don't know when it's going to happen or what's going to trigger it. Like it could be a few times a week. It can be in the course of a month. A continuous cycle of, we're doing good for a couple weeks. He beats me in the middle of the month. And then, he's great at the end of the month. So no one knows except for the abuser when they're going to abuse, because they make that choice to abuse. So a person in a trauma bond that's caught up in that abuse, is just kind of running this cycle that's built by the abuser to please this person so that they can get back to that positive reinforcement, that dopamine rush, that oxytocin rush in their brain, to that beautiful moment where this person was the great person again. It could be a parent too. That beautiful moment where your parent is your parent again, the parent they're supposed to be. So understanding those concepts as well. So some of the ways that that you're in a trauma bond, I'm going to read off my notes real quick just because I want to make sure I get this correct. Over-identifying with the abuser. So you and them are the same person, and when they're mad, you have to fix it. You identify as this person, basically. Wear the same clothes, you do the same things, you go the same places. This person is connected to you at the hip. That is not how a healthy relationship is supposed to be. Everyone is supposed to have their individual things that they like to do. Feeling indebted to the abuser. Like, I owe this person this because this person said that I suck so much that now I owe them, whatever they say I owe them. Whether it be sex, whether it be money, whether it be time, just you owe them your life, basically, because they said that you did something so bad. Like, okay, a lot of times what happens is in those moments of that honeymoon period, they will do something really nice for you, and then they'll hold it over your head later, and then you feel like you owe them, like this is an exchange for the nice thing you did. And then if you don't do it, then they make you feel like this crappy person, like you're just this horrible person. So that's kind of what being indebted to the abuser is. Feeling that he or she or they needs me. They need me. They need me to feel better. A lot of times abusers will start off the whole relationship with this sob story about how they were abused. A lot of times they'll start off with, I had a bad day when they come home from work. I had a bad day at work and I can't handle it because, my anger is wild. So obviously, they need me because I help them heal when they feel bad because they've been through stuff. Like, no. Growth of a partner is to support the partner in their own growth. You don't grow the partner yourself. They can't just rely on you for everything. That is unhealthy. They have to see their own individual problems and go fix it. Go get help. Go to therapy. If I had a partner, I would say, I support you in going to therapy. I'm going to sit here and talk to you after you come from therapy and ask you how it was. And, you know, whatever you're doing to grow, I'm going to support you. But I'm not going to be your only thing that grows you, because it's not how it works. What else? Explaining almost everything away. So that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in. And cognitive dissonance is basically where we see the truth in front of us. We know that, you know, this person is hitting us and doing horrible things, but instead of telling ourselves the truth, we consistently lie to ourselves. Cognitive dissonance is, oh, he hit me because the supervisor at work yelled at him today, and you know how his anger is, so, you know, I, you know, was talking too loud when he came in from work, and he got mad and he hit me because he had a bad day. And, you know, if you have to do that much to fix whatever problem this person has, that is cognitive dissonance. If you notice you're continuously making excuses and continuously lying to yourself about what's really happening with this person, that is cognitive dissonance. Protecting the abuser. So that goes into cognitive dissonance too. Like, if somebody sees the abuser being abusive to you out in public, and, you know, they try to come and defend you, and you're protecting the abuser. If you finally get brave enough to make a police report and call the police, and then the police comes, and you say to the police, well, you know, it was a mistake. I didn't mean it, you know. I didn't, you know. And a lot of times those situations can be fueled by threatening behavior, threats made to the victim. So, you know, it's not always cognitive dissonance. Sometimes it's fear. Like, I'm afraid that if I send him to jail, he's going to send Pookie to kill me at my house, because that's what he threatened. So, you know, so it's not always, you know, your brain trying to make things better because of the oxytocin. So that's what cognitive dissonance is, really, is the oxytocin trying to make this bond better than what it really is. And, you know, since women have a surplus of oxytocin, it's going to be working in overdrive, influencing the cognitive dissonance. Like, no, I need, the number one in the world right now is this person, and I need to make this relationship work. What else? Allowing the abuse to continue to please the abuser. I mean, again, back to the oxytocin. I want to make this abuser happy. So, I mean, if this makes him happy, then I'm going to do it. And then, yeah, how can you step out of that? How can you step out of a trauma bond that your mind has you in? Well, therapy, number one, most important one. Seeking help from a professional that specifically deals with trauma. That's important. You know, it specializes in trauma, understands what a trauma bond is, understands what, you know, how difficult it is to escape an abusive relationship, and can help you through that, you know, understanding what your safety is, making a safety plan on how to leave the relationship when you are able to get through this trauma bond. How do I leave this relationship to make sure that I'm safe and that I'm not hurt? Having a friend and family members, getting back in touch with them so that you have a safe place to go to when you need to escape. Packing a bag and leaving it over at your safe place so that you don't have to pack when you leave, when you up and leave. You and your children, if you have children, can just up and leave without worrying about it. Knowing where your closest shelters are and things like that. Getting on the hotlines, asking those questions to know, to make sure that you can be in the most safest environment as possible when getting away from the abuser. You know, that's kind of been my main focus, is prolonged trauma in the Black community. And this is the second video, trauma bonding. I hope it helped. The question I would leave is, have you ever been in a trauma bond? Have you ever experienced manipulation or abuse from somebody, and how did it affect you? Hope to hear from you soon. Bye.